You'd think after 3 decades serving as a federal judge, mediating disputes from cartel prosecutions to shady corporate schemes, that I'd seen every flavor of madness this country had to offer. I'd stared into the abyss of legal chaos and bureaucracy more times than I can count. So when I moved to a quiet little cul-de-sac just outside the city, all I wanted was silence, a porch swing, and a cup of coffee I could drink without having to redact half of it for a court transcript. The neighborhood looked ideal, idyllic even. Birds chirping, lawns trimmed like marine haircuts, and neighbors who still brought over cookies in a Tupperware you weren't expected to return. For the first few weeks, everything was damn near perfect. I was even starting to enjoy the sound of leaf blowers at 7 a.m., a noise that, in the city, meant check your car for bullet holes. But as it turns out, peaceful suburbia had its own kind of war zone, just a lot more clipboard-based. It started the afternoon I was chatting with my neighbor Jeff. Jeff was a soft-spoken guy in his 40s with the kind of look you get when your dog is your therapist and your wife controls the thermostat. We were laughing about something. I forget what. And that's when I heard it. The Prius. It wasn't the hybrid's usual gentle purr. No, this one groaned up the hill like it had something to prove. It was painted in a camo green color so aggressively ugly it made my retinas file a complaint. On the side was the most ridiculous decal I'd ever seen. HOA Enforcement. It parked diagonally like it had just arrived at a hostage negotiation. And then he stepped out. The guy looked like someone had tried to crossbreed a retired mall cop with a bootleg version of the Terminator. Aviator shades, tight polo shirt tucked into cargo pants that screamed tactical, and the gait of a man who practiced power poses in the mirror. What the hell is that? I asked, already regretting the answer. Jeff sighed like he'd just opened a bill from Comcast. That's Daren, he said, lowering his voice. Karen's husband. I blinked. Karen? Yeah. Jeff nodded solemnly. She's the president of the HOA. He's their, enforcer. HOA. Enforcement. Like some kind of suburban FBI. Jeff looked around like we were being watched. They basically run everything here. Surprised it's taken them this long to show up. Just watch yourself. And with that cryptic gem, Jeff retreated into his house like a man heading into storm shelter. I stood there, watching the absurdly militarized Prius and its self-important driver like I'd just stumbled onto a satire skit. Quiet neighborhood, I muttered, shaking my head. They said it would be peaceful. Instead, I've landed in some step-forward version of The Sopranos. Bonnie and Clyde. If Clyde had a clipboard and a superiority complex. I should have known that was just the beginning. The next morning, around 9:05 a.m., someone started banging on my door like they were trying to breach the gates of Mordor. Not a knock, a demand. I opened it, and there they stood, Karen and Daren. Matching sunglasses, matching judgmental faces, matching postures like they had been posing for the HOA annual calendar. April, the tyrants. If someone had told me these two were former agents from the Matrix who got reassigned to lawn violations, I would have believed them. They didn't say hello. They didn't smile. They just stared at me like I'd just peed on their begonias. Your mailbox is slightly leaning, Karen said flatly. No, good morning. No, nice to meet you. Just that, as if it was a war crime. A serious violation, Daren chimed in, nodding like a bobblehead with a badge. I stared at them. Leaning mailbox. Got it, I said deadpan. I'll alert Homeland Security. Karen didn't flinch. It's a Class B HOA violation under Article 6, Section 12. Leaning, chipped paint, and your hedges are encroaching by approximately. She actually pulled out a ruler, 1.3 inches onto the public sidewalk space. Also, Daren added, now fully puffed up like a defensive pigeon, your grass exceeds the community's standard height of 2.5 inches. It's at least 3.1. That's aggressive growth. He actually said aggressive growth. I nodded slowly. Wow. I had no idea my Kentucky bluegrass posed such a threat to national security. Please rectify all violations immediately, Karen ordered, turning on her heel like a general in heels. Daren followed, chest out, hands on hips. I swear the guy was auditioning for HOA, Special Victims Unit. I closed the door behind them and sighed. I thought I moved to a quiet neighborhood, I muttered. Turns out I moved to Planet Karen, and she brought her own stormtrooper. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe they'd gotten it out of their system. I was wrong, of course. Oh, so very wrong. From that day forward, they started showing up like Jehovah's Witnesses with a legal complex. Clipboard inspections became daily rituals. I got a warning for hosting a potentially disruptive wind chime. A wind chime. The violations were ridiculous, but I wasn't just annoyed. I was intrigued. See, the longer I dealt with them, the more I realized this wasn't just about a tilted mailbox. These two were working a system. They weren't just on a power trip, they were operating some kind of HOA-based extortion racket. The tipping point came about 2 weeks in. They showed up again, this time with even more smugness than usual. If your fines continue to accumulate, Karen said sweetly, like a spider offering tea, we'll be forced to initiate proceedings to seize your home. Yup, Daren said, all puffed up like he was about to pull out handcuffs made of HOA guidelines. That's the rule. Too many fines, and the property can be reclaimed. Reclaimed. Like they were Roman conquerors, and I was a rebellious province. I just smiled. Interesting, I said calmly. Thank you for the heads up. They strutted off like they'd just executed a flawless ambush. I stood in the doorway and shook my head. This can't be real, I said out loud. If someone told me this, I'd have them committed. But I wasn't going to sit around and wait for the HOA Inquisition to turn into a full-blown coup. I was done letting them run the show. They wanted a fight? Fine. They just picked one with the wrong retiree. After the friendly warning about seizing my house, I decided it was time to take a walk. Not because I needed air, although believe me, I did, but because I needed information. The kind you only get by leaning on fences and pretending to care about someone else's sprinkler settings. So I took a casual stroll down the street, stopping to wave, nod, and, when I could, chat with the neighbors. They all had the same look when I brought up Karen and Daren, a half-swallowed grimace, like they'd bitten into something rotten and had to pretend it was pie. Every single one of them lowered their voice the second the names came up. One woman, Cheryl, retired nurse, kind eyes, perpetual gardener, whispered like we were conspiring against a dictatorship. They got the Langleys, you know. Sweet couple. Been here 30 years. Got them how? I asked. They hounded them over a broken fence plank, she said. Then weeds. Then a missing permit for a bird bath. Fines piled up. They threatened legal action, said they could take the house. Eventually, the Langleys just left. Sold the house to Karen's cousin. Dirt cheap. Cheryl's voice cracked a bit. She made an example of them. And there it was. The pattern. Karen and Daren weren't just obnoxious. They were running a full-blown HOA grift. Manufacture violations. Stack up fines. Intimidate until people caved, and then snatch up the properties through legal loopholes. It was like a real estate Ponzi scheme powered by pettiness and patio rules. They've been doing it for years, another neighbor muttered as he watered the same patch of grass for the 5th time. No one wants to speak up. They'll just make your life hell. You're either with them or you're moving out. I'd seen enough. I wasn't dealing with suburban nuisance. I was dealing with a slow-burn criminal racket wrapped in a cardigan and topped with a Kate Gosselin haircut. So while Karen and Daren ramped up their game, I ramped up mine. Every visit, every comment, every paper they left taped to my door. I recorded it all. I'd installed a doorbell camera the day I moved in, and now it was capturing gold. The passive-aggressive threats. The outright intimidation. The synchronized yeah from Daren that made him sound like a sentient fax machine. I saved every video, every document, every timestamp, and I labeled the folder. Karen and Daren, evidence. I know, very creative, but it got the point across. The next 2 weeks felt like I was stuck in a parody of a Cold War spy thriller, except the enemies were wielding violation notices instead of nuclear codes. They came almost daily. You have unauthorized patio lighting, Karen said one morning. Too bright. Your trash bin was visible from the street for longer than 5 minutes. She told me the next. Violation. Your lawn gnome looks confrontational, Daren added once, squinting at it like it had personally insulted him. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I smiled. I nodded. I thanked them. And I documented everything. Then came the day they crossed the line. They showed up just before noon. I just sat down with coffee and was halfway through a crossword when the knock came. More of a pounding, really. Like they were trying to summon me through brute force. I opened the door. There they were, the dynamic duo of doom. Karen looked smug. Daren, even smugger, which I previously thought was impossible. But he'd found a new level. "You've accumulated 24 outstanding fines," Karen said. "As per our bylaws, you have until the end of the week to vacate the property." "Or what?" I asked, genuinely curious how far this circus would go. "Or we escalate to legal seizure and municipal involvement," Karen said, like she was declaring war on Belgium. Daren puffed his chest so hard I was worried he'd pop a rib. "You have until Friday, or you're out." I gave them a calm, patient smile, the kind I used to give smug attorneys right before I ruled against them in court. "Well," I said, "thank you for the notice. That's very considerate of you." They hated that. Karen's eyes narrowed. Daren made a noise that was somewhere between a snort and a squeal. "Actually, no, not Friday. Tomorrow. You're out tomorrow," she snapped. "Tomorrow it is," I said, and gently closed the door in their faces. Inside, I sipped my coffee and smiled. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning was oddly beautiful. Blue sky, light breeze, a solid 72 degrees, which, given the mood in the neighborhood, felt like a tactical advantage. And right on time, 9 a.m. sharp, came the pounding. I opened the door. Daren stood there like a suburban Terminator. Aviators on, arms akimbo, chest puffed so far out he looked like a goose in heat. "Time's up, old man," he said, triumph in his voice. "You're done." I blinked at him. "I don't think so," I said, cool as you please. Daren frowned. "You don't think so?" He stepped forward. "You're under arrest." "Oh," I said, stepping slightly to the side. "Now that's interesting." Daren paused. "What?" "Because that's the first accurate thing you've said since we met," I added. "Except you're not the one making the arrest." I opened the door wider and stepped aside. The look on Daren's face was priceless. There he was, standing on my front step like a suburban warlord, ready to arrest me using the full force of the Homeowners Association's mighty clipboards. And there, stepping out from behind the door, was my nephew. Now, let me paint this for you. He wasn't in some cheap suit or a polo with FBI ironed on by Etsy. No, full tactical vest, official badge on the chest, government-issue sunglasses. The kind of guy that makes grown men check if their taxes are up to date just by existing in the same zip code. "Agent Callahan, Department of Federal Property and Fraud Investigations," he said, flashing his badge at Daren like he was ordering a sandwich. Daren blinked, and then blinked again, and then said eloquently, "Double what?" "Daren, you are under federal investigation for multiple counts of fraud, extortion, attempted unlawful property seizure, and issuing falsified enforcement actions under a non-governmental entity. You have the right to remain silent, though frankly, I'd recommend you start now." You could see Daren's brain trying to reboot like a Windows 95 computer in a thunderstorm. I just work for the HOA, he said, voice cracking. "Incorrect," Agent Callahan replied. "You and Karen run the HOA like a personal fiefdom. You fabricate fines, threaten residents, and you've extorted property from at least one family on record. Congratulations. That's no longer a neighborhood drama. That's interstate fraud." I'll give it to Daren. He tried to make a run for it. He turned so fast he got tangled in his own shoelaces and went down like a sack of potatoes. Right there, on my porch, arms flailing, sunglasses flying, dignity left somewhere around the sidewalk. My nephew sighed, clearly unimpressed. "For the record," he said, slapping cuffs on Daren, "you're also being detained for impersonating a law enforcement officer. You literally put HOA Enforcement on a Prius, Daren. That's a new one." I didn't mean," Karen said. "She told me." Daren sputtered like a half-broken sprinkler. "And now she gets her turn," I added with a smile. Right on cue, a second federal agent was already knocking on their door. A police cruiser had pulled up beside my lawn. Another was idling in front of theirs. Suburbia was getting a very public reminder that the law didn't stop at cul-de-sacs. Karen opened her door, all righteous fury and frozen Botox. And then she saw Daren, in handcuffs, face down on my porch with my nephew reading him his rights. Her jaw dropped. Her lip trembled. She looked at the approaching officer like she couldn't believe anyone had the audacity to arrest her. Karen Johnson, the officer said, voice steady. You are being taken into custody for HOA-related extortion, conspiracy to commit fraud, abuse of regulatory power, and unlawful coercion of property. I'm the president of this neighborhood, she shouted. And now, I said from my porch, you're about to be the president of Cell Block C. You could practically hear the neighbors gasp in unison, or maybe that was just suppressed laughter. I turned to see a dozen people pretending to water grass, walk dogs, check mailboxes, and sweep the same patch of driveway for the 5th time. Every eye was glued to the scene. Karen was cuffed and walked to the cruiser, still protesting. Daren was finally standing upright, albeit with a busted ego and a bruised kneecap, being read his formal charges while my nephew kept the expression of a man who'd rather be doing literally anything else. For the record, he muttered to me, I left a wiretap on a cartel leader's boat for this. And I'm very grateful, I replied, patting him on the shoulder. As the squad cars pulled away, the silence they left behind felt loud. I turned back toward the street. Jeff, the nervous neighbor from day one, approached slowly, still holding a garden hose that had been spraying the same bush for 20 minutes. Was that real? He asked. Very, I said. Are they actually going to jail? I nodded. Fraud, intimidation, financial abuse of the elderly. Yeah, they're going away for a while. Jeff's face did something I'd never seen it do. He smiled, then laughed. Then, to my utter shock, raised both arms in the air and shouted, She's gone. Across the street, someone cheered. Another neighbor popped a can of beer. A golden retriever barked happily, which I took as confirmation that even the local pets hated Karen and Daren. It was like someone had lifted a hex off the neighborhood. People were coming out of their houses, talking, laughing. One guy, I kid you not, put on a barbecue apron that said Kiss the Cook, dragged out a grill, and yelled, Block party. Just like that, peace began returning. Back inside my house, I finally sat down on the couch. It was quiet, beautifully, absurdly quiet. Then came a knock. Not aggressive, not entitled, just a normal, human knock. I opened the door to see Cheryl, the sweet neighbor. Just wanted to say thank you, she said, voice a little choked up. You stood up when the rest of us couldn't. Or wouldn't. I smiled. They tried to mess with the wrong old man. I've got more legal knowledge in my left kneecap than those two had in their whole HOA charter. Come to the party, she said, holding up a plate of cookies. You're the guest of honor. Does it come with a sarcasm waiver? We'll write it into the bylaws, she laughed. Let me tell you, I've seen a lot of courtrooms. I've handed down life sentences, unwrapped entire corruption rings, and once told a CEO he'd be better off selling hot dogs than manipulating pension funds. But I'd never seen a takedown that made so many garden gnomes smile. News spread faster than Daren's Prius could screech out of a cul-de-sac. By that evening, the neighborhood had transformed. People I'd never seen outside of a car window were suddenly best friends. There were lawn chairs, kids on scooters, a bouncy castle, don't ask me how, and more potato salad than any human community should be able to produce in 2 hours. And at the center of it all, me. Apparently, toppling a 2-person HOA dictatorship turns you into a local folk hero. One guy even offered to mow my lawn forever. Another lady, I think her name was Denise, said, I'm naming my grandson after you. Which, considering my name is Walter, seemed borderline cruel. But I appreciated the sentiment. A makeshift banner went up between 2 trees. Free at last. Car. In. Ma is real. Subtle? No. Satisfying? Absolutely. The best part? It wasn't over. Karen and Daren's legal situation wasn't just a little slap on the wrist level. No. Their arrests opened the floodgates. Turns out, when you threaten, fine, and extort enough people, someone's been quietly keeping receipts. In this case, a retired federal judge with a folder labeled Karen and Daren, evidence, and enough legal precision to make a prosecutor weep tears of joy. My nephew and his team dug in hard. The house they stole from the elderly Langleys? Fraudulent seizure, aided by intimidation, threats of financial ruin, and zero legitimate legal proceedings. Karen had even faked board approval documents by forging signatures. Daren had collected checks and deposited them into a private LLC. Classy. Turns out, their cozy little operation wasn't limited to our neighborhood. There were complaints from 2 other HOAs they'd been involved with, all showing the same pattern. Rack-up violations, threaten foreclosure, offer to buy at a deep discount, and move in family or friends. They were basically running a real estate scam under the banner of community standards. Well, the community bit back, and the law came with it. A few weeks later, we got the full report. Karen, 6 counts of fraud, 2 of extortion, 1 for falsifying public documents, and 1 very poetic count of misuse of authority in a community-governed jurisdiction. Daren, impersonation of law enforcement, fraud, conspiracy, intimidation, and a whole section titled General Idiocy while in possession of a Prius. Okay, that last part wasn't technically in the charge sheet, but it should have been. The judge, not me, I was long retired, sentenced them both. Real prison time. Not a slap on the wrist, not home detention with Netflix and wine. Karen got 8 years. Daren got 5 in community service, which I can only hope involves weeding the kind of lawns he once declared war on. Their house. Auctioned off. Why? Because they owed a small mountain of fines. Real fines now, from real agencies, and the IRS, local authorities, and several civil suits came knocking all at once. The property was seized to pay restitution to affected neighbors, including the Langleys. And the Prius? Sold. To a local towing company, ironically. Last I heard, they use it as a cautionary tale on how not to impersonate a cop. The aftermath? Glorious. For the first time in years, our neighborhood was alive. People smiled. Dogs barked for fun instead of fear. Someone even suggested forming a new HOA board, but the rest of us shouted them down so fast they spilled their lemonade. The neighborhood collectively agreed on a new rule. No more Karens in leadership. No more Darens near clipboards. As for me, well, I got invited to everything. Potlucks, barbecues, poker nights, even a local book club that suspiciously doesn't read anything but drinks a lot of wine. One neighbor brought me a pie and said, "You're our suburban Batman." I didn't have the heart to correct her. Besides, Batman never had a porch swing and a permanent exemption from HOA fees. Yes, exemption. The new interim board, made up of actual decent people, voted unanimously to waive all HOA dues for me. Lifetime diplomatic immunity, Jeff called it. I told him I didn't want special treatment. They told me to shut up and eat the pie. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops that evening, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, watching kids play in yards that used to be silenced by fear of fines. I smiled, leaned back, and muttered to myself, "Well, Karen and Daren, hope you enjoy your new neighborhood." And somewhere, far behind bars and barbed wire, I like to imagine they're arguing about hedge height. You'd be amazed how quickly a neighborhood heals once the tyrants are carted off in matching handcuffs. Within days, the air just felt different. Lighter. As if Karen's perfume of passive aggression had finally cleared, replaced by fresh-cut grass, grill smoke, and the subtle scent of long-overdue freedom. The new HOA board, temporarily assembled from the sanest, least clipboard-obsessed residents we had, got to work scrubbing away the legacy. They voided all unpaid Karen-issued fines. All fraudulent violations? Expunged. Every neighbor she'd targeted personally got a letter of apology, and in one case, an actual cake. The Langleys, bless them, were even tracked down. With the help of my nephew's agency and a few pro bono lawyers, they got a settlement and a heartfelt invitation to move back into the neighborhood. They declined, already happily settled in Florida, but sent back a handwritten note that said, "Tell Karen we said hi from the free world." The board read it aloud at the first official HOA town hall. The applause lasted longer than most weddings. As for Karen and Daren, their mugshots made the local news. Daren, of course, was still wearing those damn aviators, even indoors. Karen's expression looked like someone had just told her Whole Foods stopped carrying oat milk. Word is, she's already trying to start a prison block organization, but rumor also says it's not going well. Apparently, prison guards don't respond well to clipboard complaints about toilet paper alignment. Meanwhile, Daren's assigned community service includes lawn maintenance under supervision. I can only hope one day he's forced to mow my lawn, just so I can offer him lemonade and a reminder of how badly he miscalculated. The house they once ruled from, the HOA Castle, as some sarcastically dubbed it, went up for public auction. A lovely young couple bought it. Artists, if I'm not mistaken. One of them turned the old HOA meeting room into a pottery studio. Fitting, considering Karen once declared that creative expression must be contained within beige palettes. They painted the shutters bright yellow. We all cheered. Even the mailman stopped to take a picture. The Prius? It's now parked at the local towing company, fully wrapped in vinyl that reads, "Not a police vehicle, but nice try." I laughed for 10 solid minutes when I saw it. And me? I finally got what I came for. Peace. Real, uninterrupted, no knock on the door peace. I spend my mornings drinking coffee on the porch. No harassment. No ridiculous fines. No synchronized husband-wife duo reciting threats like it's community theater. Neighbors wave now, not because they're trying to see who's next on the violation list, but because they're actually happy. Kids ride bikes again. Cheryl planted a whole rose garden without having to file a permit in triplicate. Jeff walks around without looking over his shoulder like he's in witness protection. Even the hedges seem happier. A few days ago, someone left a gift basket on my porch. Cookies, a thank you note, and a single bottle of whiskey with a tag that said, "For services rendered in defense of the neighborhood." I chuckled, took a sip, and thought about how close I'd come to letting them push me out, to giving up my little slice of retirement heaven to a couple of clipboard tyrants with delusions of grandeur. But that's the thing about bullies. They always assume silence means weakness. What they forget is that sometimes silence is just someone collecting evidence. And sometimes that someone spent 30 years as a federal judge with a Rolodex full of very capable, very motivated friends. So if, by some absurd miracle, another Karen ever crawls out from the ashes of clipboard hell, well, let's just say I've still got that folder. And I've added a new one right next to it. Karen and Daren, Aftermath. Weeks passed. Life had returned to the neighborhood like someone had flipped a switch. The lawns never looked greener. The air never smelled sweeter, and the sound of children laughing didn't come with the faint background thread of a clipboard anymore. Karen and Daren were gone. Convicted. Sentenced. Their names spoken only when someone needed a cautionary tale or a really dark punchline. I'd gotten used to the quiet. The peace I moved for had finally arrived and stuck around. I had my coffee, my porch, my community. And maybe, just maybe, I had even started liking these people. Which, frankly, was a bigger plot twist than the entire HOA saga. One evening, I was sitting out front watching the sunset when I noticed a moving truck down the street. New neighbors, fresh blood. I didn't think much of it at first. A young couple, friendly enough, unloading furniture. Someone brought over muffins. Jeff offered to help them lift a couch. Cheryl had already memorized their dog's name. Then I saw her. She wasn't with the couple. She wasn't even helping. She was standing at the edge of the sidewalk. Short, platinum blonde bob haircut. Crisp khaki slacks. Sensible shoes. And in her hands? A leather-bound planner. She had that unmistakable energy. The kind that vibrated at a frequency just above passive-aggressive email, and just below calls the police when kids ride scooters. She was eyeing the house, measuring the distance between hedges and the street with her eyes. She turned, walked up to the new homeowner, and pointed at the front porch. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I caught the body language. That subtle, smiling but judging stance that screamed, "I'm not in charge yet." And then I saw her gesture to the curtains. The curtains. The new homeowner tilted their head in confusion. She opened her planner. I sat up in my chair. After a moment, the couple nodded politely, clearly confused, and walked back into the house. She stayed outside, scribbling notes. That's when I stood. She noticed me watching, smiled, and walked casually in my direction. She stopped near the sidewalk in front of my house, her pen clicking with purpose. "Evening," she said. "Evening," I replied slowly. "Lovely place here," she said, scanning my hedges. "Yours too, I'm guessing." "Oh no, I'm not moving in," she said. "I'm just consulting, helping establish a few things for the incoming HOA. They've asked me to offer some guidance." She extended a hand. "You can call me Kendra." I didn't take the hand. I just stared for a beat, then smiled. "Well, Kendra, welcome to the neighborhood," I said. She nodded, pleased, and turned back toward the street, jotting something down in that cursed planner. I reached into my shirt pocket, pulled out my phone, and scrolled to the contact list. Tapped one name. It rang once. "Agent Callahan," I said when my nephew picked up. "I think we might have a new problem." Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.